not a specific number for childcare. But then, why bother putting a value on something as unimportant as Quinea issue? You've been listening to Time with me, James. The producer is Georgia Allen. And this is a production of BBC Radio 4. You can hear the final episode of Child, celebrating the first year of the child's life, same time next Friday.
How does the country decide who gets into Downing Street?
What you can really understand from opinion polls particularly well is the direction of travel.
I'll be looking at how our elections work,
They're not really debates, they're kind of gladiatorial blood sports.
helping you navigate your way from polls to manifestos to campaigns and coverage and the big day itself.
For me, the most exciting graphic of all is that good old springometer.
Every single election I've worked on, there has been a big shocker.
Understand the UK election with me, Adam Fleming, on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. Next Monday to Friday afternoon at 1:45.
BBC News at 3 o'clock. The Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer says he understands why those being honoured yesterday at D-Day events in Normandy might feel raw at the Prime Minister's decision to return early. Other world leaders stayed on for the full day. Rishi Sunak said it had been a mistake and apologised. Our political editor Chris Mason gives his assessment of the decision.
A unforced error, an own goal, and actually when you hear the explanation from the Prime Minister, he says the itinerary was set out 6 or 7 weeks ago. Well, okay, the rest of us didn't know an election campaign was imminent then, but he did. And secondly, that means he would have missed that event yesterday come what may, and those questions around his judgment, irrespective of the election campaign, would have been very live.
Representatives from 7 political parties are preparing for tonight's election debate on BBC One. They'll include Labour's Angela Rayner, Conservatives Penny Mordaunt, and Nigel Farage for Reform UK, alongside speakers for the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, Paul Cymru, and the SNP. A childminder has admitted the manslaughter of a 9-month-old boy in her care in March last year. Reports heard that Karen Foster, who's 62 and from Lancashire, shook Harlow College after he'd fallen from his high chair and began crying, causing significant brain injuries. Greek Coast Guards have joined the search for the missing broadcaster Michael Mosley. A sniffer dog was brought over this morning from Athens to join emergency teams searching the island of Syria. The 67-year-old was last seen going for a hike on Wednesday. Germany has introduced checks on all its borders until the end of the European Football Championship in mid-July. They meant to keep out violent football hooligans from abroad and Islamist terror sects. Latest figures suggest pollution incidents in the area supplied by the firm Welsh Water increased last year despite £483 million worth of investment. There were 107 incidents in the year from 2023 to 24, up from 89 the previous year. BBC News.
Hello! With our much criticised Millennium now careering towards the crucial 2.5% completed point, we at the News Quiz thought it time to celebrate the fact that it is still clinging on to a podium spot in the top millenniums of the last 2024 years. Well done, everyone involved. Nonetheless, there are still a few things to work on, and over the new series of the News Quiz, we will be seeing if the world can improve on what it gave us earlier this year. To find out how it gets on, join me, Andy Zoltman, and my platinum grade panellists on the News Quiz. Tonight's 6:30 comedy on BBC Sounds and Radio 4.
Now on Radio 4 we join Kathy Clugston for Gardener's Question Time. Hello and welcome to this week's GQT. We're rooting around in the archives for this edition about the ins and outs, the do's and don'ts of container gardening. Whether you're dreaming of a vibrant balcony oasis, planning a herb garden for your kitchen windowsill, or wanting to add a dash of colour to your patio, container gardening is accessible, creative, and offers seasonal versatility. So much to enjoy. So join me as I unearth some clippings from GQT's past to help you get the most from your pots. Our first question is from special 1000th anniversary edition of GQT in 1972. It was chaired by producer Ken Ford, who stepped in as Franklin Engelman had sadly just died a day before the recording. We start with a definition.
Well, the increase in the popularity of houseplants is one of the phenomena of the last 10 years or so. Our next guest is a specialist in this field and also a prominent member of the Royal Horticultural Society, Mr. Tom Rochford.
Can we help to resolve the confusion that appears to exist in the minds of many people regarding what are houseplants and what are potted plants? About 25 years ago, the term houseplant was almost unknown, and all plants in pots were known as potted plants.
I'm a rather simple-minded person, Mr. Rochford, and I like starting with thinking of definitions. And to me, a pot plant is a plant in a pot, irrespective of what that plant is or where it is. And to me, a house plant is a plant which can thrive under the conditions of a house, a normal dwelling house. And this is distinct from a greenhouse plant or a hothouse plant or anything like that. And so I think in our modern houses there are a large number of pot plants which are not house plants because they are just dying very slowly. And this is not bad, some of them die beautifully, and this is good, they give decoration. But the real difference, in my opinion, is in fact that one can live and thrive year after year in a house, whereas a pot plant is just a description of the container in which the thing is grown.
I wonder what Mr. Rochford got to say about all this. Does he agree?
I'm getting thoroughly steamed up. I've been longing to burst in, but being a gentleman, I have to keep quiet. A house plant should only be a plant that can live in the home with permanence amongst the ornaments and the furniture, and you live with it like a dog and your cat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rochford. I'm stopping it there. Mr. Rochford, thank you.
Some strong opinions there from former GQT panellist and biologist Alan Gemmell, and a thoroughly steamed up Mr. Rochford. Well, whether it's houseplants or potted plants, our love of container gardening remains undiminished, as evidenced by the recent RHS Urban Garden Show in Manchester, which we visited a few weeks ago. The challenge for many of us who live in urban locations is limited space. Let's hear from one rather well-known city-dwelling questioner on that very topic on the same show back in 1972.
Well now, we have a charming young lady who keeps me up late every Saturday night. And if my wife's listening, she'll know what I mean, I hope, when I tell her that it's Esther Ranson of Braidensweet. Esther, your problem.
Well, my problem is that my only garden is a kind of vicarious garden that I get by listening to this program every Sunday afternoon. And the reason I like it so very much is that it nearly makes up for me for the fact that I live in a small flat in London. It's a flat that faces north. It's overlooked by a lot of other flats. And the only plant that I've got near me is a bowl of large green leaves, which seems to survive anything I do to it, and I think is an ivy. And another charming bowl of plastic snowdrops, which also seems quite hardy. But I think I ought really to turn over a new leaf and branch out a bit. So I wondered perhaps if you could advise me, if I started a window box, would the team perhaps help me to bring a little colour into my life?
Oh, yes. Very dangerous, this, I would think. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Alan, sorry, Bill.
He knows that I'll treat it with the respect it deserves.
Right.
You can always bring more colour into your life by buying plastic roses or plastic tulips or plastic something else. This, of course, would add to the situation. But you want a window box. Wooden boxes, remember to bore holes in the bottom of them so they can drain out, so that water can drain out.
What then happens to the people walking underneath that?
No, not if it just drains down the wall of the house and leaves a nice mark down the outside of the house.
Yeah.
This is quite attractive when moss grows on it. You can easily buy a compost. I think it's better to buy one than to try to make one up yourself. You can buy any cheap, good compost, John Innes, any one of these will do. And then all you've got to do is to plant coloured seeds which will produce coloured flowers. And I would suggest to try a lot of the simpler coloured flowers if you've never tried the things before. Petunias, tagetes, if you like, Obritia, some of the begonias that will scramble over the sides and you trail down the front of the house and among the moss that's there. The important thing, I'm sure, is to get the plants well firmed in and just have a go, but do be sure that you can handle the box carefully.
Fred, now we've got to the flowers. Have you any suggestions?
Yes, what I was going to suggest is that you still have your window box, but have it indoors.
Ah, that would be even easier.
You see, then the cats don't get in it, the sparrows don't get in it, and all the rest of it. And then you go along and you buy some simple pot plants. House plants. As a beginner, which you admit, I suggest that you get the most simple ones and the hardiest ones, and perhaps one of the toughest and hardiest. They even grow on the windowsills of the BBC, and by God, they can chip there. Chlorophytum. And if the leaves go dead at the end, I'm trying to answer a few thousand questions about this. Get a pair of scissors and cut them off.
But I think we've got to say this very quickly. What Fred has advised you to do is to grow houseplants, not to have a window box.
If you want some colour, in my opinion, you don't want chlorophytum, you don't want scissors, you don't want rice because there's no colour about the things anyway. I think in such a situation, if you have her in the window box inside, as you say, you are then growing houseplants more or less. You can grow in summer pendulous begonias, which you mentioned, Alan, didn't you? And the drooping type of fuchsias, like, say, the Tennessee waltz. This sort of thing could really bring some. This is for an inside window box. If you're having the window box outside, I should want to know how many floors up it is, stories up because of the wind effect. How high?
Yes, well, I'm on the second floor.
Oh, not too bad, maybe. Not too bad.
Esther, have they been any help at all?
They've really sorted it inside and out.
Some brilliant suggestions there for the broadcaster and campaigner Esther Ransom, from Fred Loads and friendly rivals Bill Sorbutts and Alan Gemmell 52 years ago. Our next question is a little more recent. It comes from a show in 2014. One of the great advantages of containers is that you're able to move them around. But in some situations that is not ideal. We'll need all hands on deck for this one.
Good afternoon, my name's Paul Holdsworth from Kendal. I'm the skipper of Sunflower, which is one of Windermere Lake Cruises' smaller wooden launches. What potted plant would the panel recommend I grow on Sunflower's roof? It must be stable, seagull-proof and very weatherproof.
Right, a potted plant for the roof of this little boat. Pippa.
Well, for the summer, you've got to have rows upon rows of those dwarf sunflowers. Yes, you have. Or do seagulls like eating those?
What about seagulls like eating them?
They're really short
falling
ones.
over all over the place. There'll be
Yeah, but you're going to have
waves here.
Well, it's down to the skipper to keep things level.
Thank you for that.
So I think you've got to have big, long troughs so they're nice and low to the ground and stable. And you plant them or you sow them up with dwarf sunflowers and it would look absolutely gorgeous. They get confused because they wouldn't know which way they're sailing, but you know. Oh, I think it would look lovely. Go on, have a go.
I'll give it a try.
Bonnie?
Gosh, this is a tall order, isn't it? Because it must be windy up there.
No, short order. Definitely short order.
But it's windy up there. The seagulls come and peck at just about everything,
And poop
don't
on
they?
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely all over. I was going to say a bit of stretch of wildflower meadow that you could just go and stretch out on. You don't think it would work?
I don't get time to stretch out on anything.
Will you get time to go up and water them every day?
Yes, I do the hanging baskets and the potted plants on the piers. I'm sure I can
Oh,
find
you
time.
do? You're obviously really keen then, aren't you?
I'll try.
Yeah, very keen. I would go for pelargoniums actually. I think they're so nice. Love the lights. You could have maybe the traily ones would be slightly safer. There's lovely burgundy ones. Which one?
There's balcon geraniums are lovely. They have in alpine houses and things, you know, that sort of billow out and
Yeah,
really
the
bright.
lovely trailing ones. But it's going to be hard work, and you're going to have to make the pots stick on the roof without. How you're going to have pot holders, aren't you? A bit like cup holders in a car.
Cup holders. This is a heritage vessel. It's on the National Historic Ships Register. We can't cut holes in it.
But when you're lurching forward, what's to stop them all rolling off the side?
Well, exactly. That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to make those ring things.
And Paul doesn't lurch.
He does lurch.
I actually talk to some of my colleagues. I do occasionally.
Yes, I can tell you're a
Look,
lurcher.
I'm sticking up for you here.
Pelargoniums, not very exciting, but they might work.
There's a danger that occurs to boats quite often
which is lightning strikes. Very dangerous. And it's said that if you have house leeks, your house never gets hit. They will take a layer of house leeks over the whole top. And there are so many, the red ones, there are silvery ones, there are the arachnoides, which are covered in cobwebs. They do flower and throw up a 4 or 5 inch high spike of yellowish flowers. They require very little maintenance. If the seagulls land on them, they'll prick their feet, so they'll jump off again. I think that would be lovely.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of house leeks, so that gets my vote.
Yeah. Anyway, there's some suggestions for you. Enjoy your sailing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Bob Flowerdew, Bunny Guinness, Pippa Greenwood and Chair Eric Robson with some planting suggestions for the skipper of a boat on Windermere in 2014. Well, let's move now from the rippling lakes of Cumbria to the still waters of one listener's garden, and a question for James Wong at a GQT recording at Mount Stewart in County Down in 2019.
Hi there.
Hi, my name is Hilary. I'm originally from Belfast, but now I live in Manchester.
Okay.
And I was lucky enough to be able to put a sunken pond in my garden in Manchester in the back garden.
Oh, wow.
I want to put something in the front garden and haven't got the space, so I wanted a container that you could maybe perhaps recommend, which would be something that the water would stay in and not sort of hydrate or evaporate. And what would I plant in it?
So I have a few things like that, and it's actually quite tricky to find a container of that nature. So firstly, obviously it needs to be waterproof, but secondly, one of the most important things is it has a relatively thick wall, because the thinner the wall is, the more temperature fluctuation you have. And you're going to have temperature fluctuation anyway, but plants grow better at a slightly more predictable environment. So you can use things like old whiskey barrels. They sell half barrels, or you can use a terracotta pot. So you can buy terracotta pots which don't have holes in the bottom. They're less easy to find than ones that do have holes in, admittedly. And if you're up for a bit of DIY and you're good at this, I've previously bought pond liner, just like a little tiny patch of it, and someone else has someone that's just fallen a bit basically. And you can use bathroom silicone and create a double layer of this stuff just to seal up the hole. I'd also probably not go for anything zinc related, so lots of people plant up an old bathtub or an old sink, and the heat exchange of the metal, I would say, could work, but might not be ideal. You might end up with a big bacterial or an algae bloom if there was a big increase in heat, for example. So I would always prefer a ceramic container if you can get them.
And you mentioned water lily. Could you plant something, I wasn't sort of as tall, so something flat water lily would be great, but something like a grass, if there is such thing as a water grass that you could plant in it?
Yeah, there's lots of different options. So if you wanted to go down the tropical route, there's colocaceas that you can plant in. They're called elephantia. There's Canna aquatica, so it's like the regular garden canna, but it's specifically adapted to growing in water. And they're like masses of big tropical leaves. And they can be grown outside of water, but they require loads of it. So people do plant them out as bedding plants, and then are just throughout the summer having to go back and forward, watering it all the time. The brilliant thing about having it in a pond is you just have to top up the water level. So you could go away for 2 or 3 weeks in a really, really hot summer, and there would still be water for those plants. You could probably fit in a very miniature water lily. I'd go for something like Helvula, which is the smallest water lily I know of. I grow that in an aquarium at home. I call it an aquarium, it sounds very fancy. It's just a tabletop tank the size of a shoebox. I've actually grown them in a salad bowl before, so it can be really, really small and still get loads of flowers throughout the summer. So you've got some height there, but you've got some interest in water. Fantastic, well, I hope that's helpful.
Now on to a plant that thrives in a container. This question comes from a show recorded in Ullswater in the Lake District in 2017.
Good afternoon, my name is Trevor Moore. I'm from Templepatrick in Northern Ireland. About 5 years ago I bought a small callistemon. Each year I have potted it on in John Innes compost. I have watered it freely, I have fed it with general purpose fertiliser, and I have overwintered it in a cool greenhouse. The problem is I have failed to see any bottle bush spikes. Am I doing something wrong or failing to do something right? What do you reckon that?
I would have thought that in those conditions, if you're in fairly sheltered, sunny spots, is that the case?
It is south facing, it is sunny, but Templepatrick's at about 400 feet and it is a notorious frost pocket.
I think you've just answered your question, haven't you? Yeah, because there are some that are hardier than others, but they all like the sunshine. And I thought you would need to be low down. You're not pruning it by any chance either.
It hasn't been pruned also.
No, because sometimes people will cut them back and then they won't found. So I would probably say that even though it's south facing, the light levels and the sunlight levels aren't high enough to encourage it into growth. What you could do is try and deceive it by feeding it with high potash fertiliser. It's almost like overfeeding to make sure that the wood ripples, which is another essential. So if the sunshine can't do it, you can do it chemically, if you like.
Is it growing?
Yes, it's growing. It's
Growing well?
It's growing well and it's not. In fact, it's almost a metre high.
Yeah, I think they're overfeeding it because you put it in the multi-purpose, which generally tend to be rather rich, even though they've got Johniness mixed in. They're still a very rich compost, and you're feeding it as well. And I think that Matt's right. Maybe a bit of potash might help, but I think it's had too much nitrogen. It's growing just a little too happy. The conditions aren't right, so it's saying, I think I'll hang on till summer arrives. And of course, it may not get hot enough, as Matt suggested. So I think lay off the feed for a while, except possibly give it some high potash, as Matt suggested.
Just describe that to us, Stephen.
It's a wonderful thing because it has almost a bristly appearance, I always think. Often quite a lax habit with branches which should hopefully eventually start to sort of loop down slightly. Really lovely, touchy-feely green, almost fat needle-like foliage, not quite needle-like. And then beautiful, proper bottle brush style flowers, depending on the one you've chosen, but usually in shades of red and pink and so forth. And I think it's a beautiful thing, but...
Designed for Chile, not for Northern Ireland.
Well, possibly a bit, but I also wonder, you say it's now about 1 metre tall, you say you've repotted it every year. How big is the pot now?
It's at least 18 inches.
Right. Because I just wonder whether, I mean, repotting things and giving them plenty of space is obviously a good plan if they're in a container. But I wonder whether the annual repotting is also making it sort of have to start afresh a little bit each year. And you're obviously really putting your time and effort in, and I would be inclined to maybe skip the repotting for a year, because you're obviously giving it plenty of TLC. And rather than repotting it, just keep, nurturing it, but don't disturb the roots for a year and see if that helps as well.
I think, just coming back to it again, I think one thing that I would do would be actually to put it into John Innes number 2 with about 1/3 added grit, so it is grown hard. But also it's only 1 metre tall, and it's probably not mature enough to start, particularly if it's been well fed. Because the other thing is that when they've flowered, they make extension growth, and people often think towards the base of the flowers, they look like eggs on the
brown bobbly things.
Brown bobbly things. Perfect description, Pippa. Brown bobbly things. People think they're the eggs or something, and then it grows on. But I think grow it harder, be patient, and high potash fertilizer.
So how do you manage to square Pippa's advice of not potting down and your advice of potting?
I would delay the potting for a year. Can we delay it for 1 year and then use your potting?
No, do it now. And then you're doing yourself again.
Okay, and then don't do it for a year after. I agree with what you're saying. It definitely makes you do good town rules. I think we need to let them know.
There you are, Trevor. Pick your bones out of that.
Thank you very much.
Great tips there from Pippa Greenwood and Matt Biggs on caring for Callistemon. The question of Trevor mentioned the challenges of living in a frost climate. This is tricky when it comes to both plant care and the plants themselves.
Hi GQC, my name is Mike Lally and I'm from Chester in Cheshire. My question is, if I have a terracotta pot which is not advertised as frostproof, what is the best way to guarantee protection from frost, if indeed that is possible? I've seen suggestions for water repellent paint and clear acrylic varnish, but I would appreciate your thoughts on the panel. Thanks very much. Bye.
So Matthew Pottage, not all terracotta pots are the same, are they?
No, I mean, I always think if a pot is really wet and it's got a lot of moisture content and the winter is cold, there is a risk of it cracking. These guaranteed for so many years, I'm not really sure I completely believe that, to be honest. I think if you're concerned about a pot bring it into a coal garage or a greenhouse, or have it up against the wall, or see the contents of it aren't so wet. When the terracotta is fully soaking wet, and then it expands when it freezes, that's what causes the problem. I would just say, you cannot guarantee in a really bad winter that any terracotta is going to be okay. There is always the risk of cracking, but I generally find most terracotta pots will give you several years, even the cheaper ones, before they tend to blow. And they often start to decay around the top. They start to almost come into small layers and peel away almost, which I think is quite attractive and is an okay thing. And then of course, if a big terracotta pot just gets a big old crack down it, it's not game over. You can get some nice rope, or even like a brown belt. You can do it tastefully and put a bit of a strap around it, and it will, you'll get a few more years service out of it.
Yeah. What about these things Mike suggests? Water repellent paint and varnish, Bob?
But one thing that will make a difference is if he hasn't got plants that he needs to keep in the winter, is tip the stuff out of it. Because there's two things can break it. One is water in the terracotta itself expanding and cracking it, but also that lump of soil, compost in the middle, gets water in it, and that itself will expand and then break the pot. So if there's nothing important in it, empty it out and stand empty. And everything else that Matthew said, in it, put it in a dry place or somewhere. But that block of soil in the middle, that's actually more dangerous than the pot itself.
I've never used any of these paints that you're describing there, but I don't see the point of it. I don't see the logic behind it, because unless you painted both surfaces, the terracotta by definition is going to take up moisture.
Yes,
so if you just you paint the outside, but also if you do that to terracotta, you lose some of the benefits of growing in terracotta. And also, I imagine a varnish on terracotta look, to me, rather nasty.
Matthew Brodage, Bob Flowerdew and Pippa Greenwood with some tips for caring for your terracotta pots for the winter. That came from a postgrad edition of the show in Mottleston Gardens and the Isle of Wight in 2023. Terracotta pots are a really popular choice, but there are many different types of container. Over the years, you have shared some weird and wonderful ideas for planters, including old toilets, old tubing, sinks, baths, hiking boots, even an old car. It seems the same fun was being had by GQT listeners back in 1989. Here's a question from a show in Newton Aycliffe in County Durham.
Next question, please.
Ken Farrell. At the Glasgow Garden Festival, I saw strawberries grown through holes in a barrel, and flowers grown in a similar way to resemble living totem poles. I wonder if any research has been done into growing vegetables from the sides of vertical containers.
That's a new one. What next, I wonder, Fred? Could you grow vegetables in these, well, I suppose, strawberry barrel type things?
Of course you can. Yeah. I don't know if any experiments been done nationally, but I've done a few experiments in growing things this way. From columns of plastic mesh and putting the things through the side. And as long as you will put vegetables in there that will trail or semi-cascade, then yes, you will grow them. Things like French beans, they will grow in there. Bush tomatoes will grow in that situation. You can grow herbs, but don't try and grow things like carrots and things like that in there, because no way are you going to have much success. Or don't plant potatoes because they're very, very difficult to dig out. But if you want to try something a little bit unusual, why not try some runner beans? Now, there is a variety of runner bean called pickwick, and it only grows to about 18 inches tall. And that, of course, will come out through the sides. It will then start to grow up the column. You can attach it to the column, and then the beans will hang down. They'll have red flowers, and they'll give you the flower colour early on in the season, covered again by beans later on, and you sit there and eat them and admire it. And by gum, are they good.
That's the best suggestions there, Fred. Tom, anything to add?
Grow some garlic in there, but take the garlic before it gets full and chew it and use it in the sun, and then you find out who your friends are. But parsley, lettuces, the little turnip root and radish, smashing tomato called Florida basket, just make them with yolk.
And of course, Stefan, for carrots and parsnips, grown and sown at the top. You get nice long ones, won't you?
Grown at the top, yes, and put them in sideways, you go an L shape. Rather like that wonderful walking stick there, it's grown out of the side of a barrel of some sort. Yes, I must admit that I've never been very successful with this growing of things in barrels with holes in the side. Certainly not strawberries, and I remember following slavishly advice that was given by a lot of the manufacturers you sent me a sample some years ago. This was a barrel that you grew strawberries in, the plants with the holes in the side, and this thing weighed about half a tonne. The time it was filled with compost, and it was stressed that because the strawberry required sun to ripen, of course, this thing had to be turned down. So without giving yourself a double hernia each time you did it, the manufacturer supplied a set of casters to go under this thing to enable you to turn it round. But they then had an additional extra that came along, which was that because the strawberries grown in the barrel, they said, were very attractive to birds, you've had to erect a great piece of netting over the top. By the time you'd done this with the wheels and the netting over the top, it looked more like a land yacht than anything that was any use for horticulture. But herbs, certainly, I would agree herbs are successful. And if you're growing vegetables in this way and you want to try them, why not? It's fun. Can I just give you a tip of the way to put the plants in? Don't fill the barrel or the container up first of all and try and stick the things in through the holes in the side, because you will then damage the roots and they will not establish satisfactorily. Fill the barrel up to the level of the first hole, put the plants in from the inside, push them through the hole, and then fill up to the next level. And go on like that, so you're filling it up sequentially and planting sequentially, because if you try and ram them in through the side, they just keep dropping out again.
Stefan mentioned about casters. Not always a good idea, because in our local paper last year, someone's strawberry barrel was seen going down the high street at about 1 o'clock in the morning. It's too easy to pinch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, vertical gardening is all the rage these days, but that was Fred Loads, Tom Clark and Dr. Stefan Buchatsky in 1989 with some encouragement and inventive ideas for growing edibles in vertical planters. On the subject of edibles, what sort of feed do we need? Here are some rather pungent suggestions from way back in 1965.
And your question, please.
Mrs. Squire, does the team think liquid sheep manure a sufficient feed in itself for tomatoes and pot plants?
Fred.
Well, I only once came across a liquid sheep, and that was in Iraq, and that had been dead about 3 weeks. But apart from that, my immediate reaction is no. This manure water made from sheep droppings is excellent, but mostly highly nitrogenous, and do not contain potash, phosphorus, and sugar. I think it's about
I would think this wouldn't be enough. It might do for smallish pot plants, but certainly for plants with such a demand for food as tomatoes, you would certainly need to put a good fertilizer in the soil before you start it. And I think if the fruit started swelling, you need to add some more fertilizer, preferably potassium. The sheep manure all right for between, the ordinary growing, but for the critical stages, certainly you need more sheep manure.
I think certainly we'll be short of potash, I would agree. We had some rabbit manure, now rabbit manure is fairly high in potash, less high in nitrogen than is sheep manure. See, the value of an animal manure really depends on what that animal feeds on, and perhaps as important and more important, how many stomachs it has. How many stomachs does a sheep?
Who are you looking at?
Looking at you. I usually bring you around to these programs to provide answers to such like questions. This does depend on how many times that animal eats and re-eats and whatever it does to this food, you see, because at the end product,
Yes.
it does at least one. You see, take the buffalo. They've got to be vegetarian, you see. Elephant manure. I'm sorry, it's giraffe.
So lovely to hear these old clips. That was Fred Loads, Alan Gemmell and Bill Summerbutts in 1965 with some suggestions for Mrs. Squire's tomatoes. I think I'll stick to liquid seaweed. On to another important consideration when caring for our container plants, watering. Here's a question from a show broadcast in the summer of 2023.
Good afternoon, panel. My name's Paul Cotton. I'm from Oxton on the Wirral, and I would like to know whether overwatering or underwatering hanging baskets and plants in pots is wise. So over or underwatering, because we can't get it right.
Okay, this is funny because often that the answer to a problem will be, well, you're either underwatering or overwatering. How do we know which it is and which is worse, Bunny Guinness?
I don't think either is worse, to be honest, because it's essentially the same. The symptoms are very much the same when they die from drought.
or they die from overwatering. You've blotted off all those little root hairs, and so they cannot take up the water. So in effect, even when they're overwatered, they're dying from drought. And I think probably the worst thing you can do is just to sort of splash the soil with water every day or something like that. And then all the roots will come up to the surface where that little bit of moisture is. And so they're not ever going to get down onto nice deep sources where there usually is water.
And often Neil, the finger in soil technique.
Yes, you can use your finger just to gauge how wet the compost is. With baskets, though, I'd say you couldn't probably overwater them because they lose so much water through evaporation. Even if they have moss or some sort of spongy exterior, they just leak water all the time. But it's an old trick, really. It's put one of those green split canes, you can buy in the garden centre. The split you might get for a Phalaenopsis orchid, a mock orchid. And you stick that in the pot or the container. Then you can draw it across your hand and it smears, it's wet enough and slightly dry. It's just a little smear, but it needs water. If you're watering in very hot conditions, say in a glass house or a tunnel, you've got lots of linos or something, putting the water over them from a hose with a hose or whatever isn't enough. You have to kind of go over it again and again. So you go through, give it a good watering, what you think's good watering, then stop, take the thing out, one or two out of the pot, just tip it up and you'll see you've only gone in like an inch or something, and the bottom 3 or 4 inches is dry as dust. So you've got to keep going with it. It's actually quite a long job getting the water to penetrate into a lot of compost, particularly in dry weather. So it seems to form a bit of a crust on top.
Yeah, so both Bunny and Neil, Mark is saying, we've got to give it really good water, not just a little sprinkling.
My wife came out to me 2 days ago when the rain started after X amount of time and helpfully told me that I didn't need to water the pots because it had been raining. And to your point, I was kind of like, well, they do because of the rain shadow, because of the fact they just dry out a lot quicker.
What you can do with a hanging basket, what I've done in the past, is you get that plant gel stuff and made a paste of it and you line it, clad it on the inside, and that will absorb the water, and then you only need to water once a week or whatever, and then you can overwater. But sorry, I didn't quite answer on hanging baskets. Are much more difficult to overwater unless you use the gunk around the sides.
Thank you.
Thank you.
GQT panellists Bunny Guinness, Neil Porteous and Marcus Chilton-Jones giving their watering advice in Worsley and Greater Manchester. Let's add a little more greetings and a little from a
Well, my name is Annie Rhodes. I live in the centre of Train.
container challenge of all.
Karen Thomas from the Guided Down Lane. After all the years the panel have been getting their hands dirty amongst the creepy crawlies, is there any particular thing that they would really rather not see when turning over a flower pot?
You just love all things that creep, crawl and slime.
I also don't want to answer this question. Okay, I'm now going to publicly announce it will be written off forever. I cannot stand caterpillars. I actually did some sack therapy to myself a few years back, and I made myself look at photos of caterpillars. The problem was that bad. I think the hardest thing I ever did was when my son was about 4 and had to take some caterpillars into school. And I remember taking a jam jar and, like something with a pencil, to knock these revolting things off into the jar while trying to see enough in peripheral vision. But basically my eyes were tight shut. I really don't like caterpillars, and actually I'm afraid that writes caterpillars in coats, as I call butterflies as well. Totally irrational.
I've only ever found one because I'm in a dry area with sunlight in the sea, and that's flatworms, the ones that eat the other worms, and they are horrible. It arrived in a parcel of potted plants from Scotland, which is wetter and has more of a problem with them. And I must say that was disgusting and really nasty.
But where they're really nasty, I've once experienced one of these things escaping from the jar where they put it.
They say they can get out between the lid and the glass. Yeah,
Absolutely.
pretty impressive.
That is spooky.
Yeah, they're not nice, but actually it's quite some things that move until I just find interesting and curious. But lifting up a flower pot, what I would like to see is a large piece of bindweed root.
And that.
I have trouble with the big slugs, you know, the big fat slugs, when they're there and they look at you, and you look at them, and you're thinking, what am I going to do with it? Because I don't want to pick it up. So you end up sort of trying to get it on the end of a stick, and that doesn't work because they always fall off.
Aren't they using the slime off these things now as a sort of skin treatment?
They are indeed. I don't think Matt feels the need for skin treatment.
Yeah, I'd rather go sort of old and leathery, I think, rather than have slugs crawling across my face or anywhere else. I end up dithering and not knowing what to do with it, and by the time I've made up my mind, even a slug's gone.
I've got to bear in mind that the big slugs are nothing like as bad a problem in the garden as the little ones. So, pretend you can't see the little ones and let the big ones.
You said the flatworm is a truly revolting experience. Did anybody ask the flatworm?
Yeah, it probably felt that. But you know, when they leave the mucus behind you in your hand, you know, when you step in by mistake as an accident on a slug when you're wearing bare feet only, and the mucus doesn't come off the bottom of your foot very well, you should try a flatworm. I mean, I didn't stand on it, but it's amazing. I really had to work hard to clean my hand afterwards. It's gross.
Right, enjoy your afternoon tea.
Eric Robson with Pippa Greenwood, Bob Lardew and Matt Biggs creeping themselves out with the critters lurking beneath their containers. On which note, it's time for me to scurry off. I hope you've enjoyed this dive into the GQT archives. We'll be back next week when an expert panel will be taking questions from an audience in Oxford. Until then, from me, Kathy Clugston, enjoy your pots and have a great gardening week. And this Question Time was produced by Bethany Hocken. The assistant producer was Rowan Prescott. It's a Something Else production for BBC Radio 4. Here's Matthew Bannister looking ahead to Ford.
On this week's Last Word, Laura Cortines, a founding member of Argentina's Mothers of the Disappeared campaign group. Belinda Belleville, a fashion designer who dressed every female member of the royal family apart from Queen Elizabeth and quite a few film stars too. The poet John Burnside, whose acclaimed work reflected his troubled childhood in Cowboy Meet and Corby. And Roger Corman, the American film director and producer, known for his comedic output of low-budget pictures. They're all coming up with me, Matthew Bannister, after the news at 4.
Now, in short words, a Canadian girl discovers something incredible in the course of play, sort of amphidawn. so much for calling. So nice to speak to you again. This is Vanessa Belton listening to LBC at the time 3:45.
Coming up at 4 on LBC, Thomas Warwick. After the absolutely inexplicable decision to remove himself from his public duty and staying for the whole of the D-Day commemorations, how much worse is this going to get for Rishi Sunak? Thomas Warwick on LBC. July 2024. In the heart of London. A breathtaking show of precision marching and military music. The massed banners of His Majesty's Royal Marines return to Horse Guards Parade to perform their historic beating retreat ceremony on the 11th and 12th of July. Book your tickets today at www.rnrmc.org.uk. If loose and missing teeth or dentures affect the foods you can eat and make you feel embarrassed about your smile, speak to us at TDC about how we restore full sets of teeth so you get your smile and your confidence back. To learn more and book your consultation, visit smileinaday.co.uk. We're now part of Bupa.
Hey Harry. Hello mate. Got any tips for the football?
Do I ever? Your best bet is to head over to BetVictor. They're giving new customers massive odds of 100 to 1 for England to bring it home.
100 to 1?
100 to 1.
Have you got your glasses on? You sure it's 100 to 1?
Yes, I'm sure.
Listen to Harry and make your best bet with England to bring it home 100 to 1 at BetVictor. Terms and conditions apply. 18 plus gambleware.org. Maximum bet £1, minimum deposit £5. Winnings paid in free bets. Offer ends 3 p.m. on the 1st of July 2024.
Listeners, we've uncovered the reason why Britain hasn't been so great of late. It's because the country hasn't been eating enough Weetabix. So to whoever's in charge of fixing potholes, to VA